and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I'm very honoured to have Deb Calvert. Deb. This is the book that she wrote about questions. It would be in one. I'm going to do a list of my top 20 sales books, and it will be in that list, Deb.
Thank you.
And your new book, yes, your new book, which I've read, though I don't have a copy of, so I can't wave it in the air. I read the soft copy of it. And I know that you've completely redesigned it, and it is brilliant. Just like the old book, if you're in, well, as we know, if you're in sales, but if you're actually in any role and you have to ask questions, and this is not about, is it open questions or closed questions? This is about asking questions to find all kinds of things. You know, it's more detailed than that. It is just an awesome book, Deb, and it is there isn't a better book on the marketplace about asking questions, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
That's okay, and I'm not just saying that, I loved it, and for me it's a real page turner, because it's like, oh yeah, yeah, and I've written like loads of notes, and I've got so many questions to ask you that we just don't have the time to I think I've got a whole page of notes by the time I got to chapter 5, and that's actually I haven't even started the meat of the book by then, so anyway, where can people find you?
Well, on LinkedIn, Deb Calvert. The company is called People First Productivity Solutions, and there are 2 websites. The first one is our Leadership Academy. Lots of free courses, and you can get an autographed book there and sort of that type of thing. But that's peoplefirstpotential.com is that website. And the company website is People First PS, standing for Productivity Solutions. People right. First Potential, People First PS.
Thank you. And the book's available on Amazon worldwide. Not this one. You can.
That one, the brand new one, hot off the press.
New one.
Yes.
So what I'm interested to know, Deb, I wrote a second edition of my social selling book, because how many years was it? 7 years had gone on, and a lot had changed. Is that the same with you? Because 10 years have gone by, hasn't it, since you wrote that first one?
Yeah, 3 things compelled this. The first was that there's been so much academic research around questions over the past 10 years, and I was just collecting it along the way, and it changed my mind about a couple of things, but certainly reinforced many, many more things. The second driver was I'd long been hearing, but what about people who aren't in sales? And
yes.
This worked for them. And a lot of people had purchased the book and told me it worked, and I just wanted to bring it in. So I did other research with professional coaches and others, curated questions from a lot of different places, and it was time. It was time to present these 100+ benefits, all evidence-based, that you can get from asking better questions.
Because one of the things that you say is, I think you got some feedback from someone in the FBI who said, like, everybody should read this book because everybody asks questions, even us people in the FBI, which is why you're saying it's not just for salespeople.
Absolutely. In fact, he said everyone in law enforcement should be required to read this book. And that was the first Discover Questions that he said that about. And I got beautiful feedback over the past decade from people, this improved my relationships, this helped me get a job, this made me more successful. And that's very, very validating. And that's what I really hope for this book, is that with a broader audience, it just has a chance to help more people.
I remember when I first learned about open questions, and I went home and I started asking open questions, and how it was one of those times in life where you're sort of going along and all of a sudden you go up and along, but this is more than about asking open questions, isn't it?
It is. That is a good starting point. You'll find that in the book, but there's so much more. So for example, people don't know that the value of a follow-up question is much, much greater than an initial question. A follow-up question demands that you listen. It shows people that you have genuine interest and that you're responding to something that they've said. It's a trust-building, bonding experience to ask a follow-up question.
Because one of the things that you say in the book is that, and I agree with you, is that questions have become marginalized. we're a society on transmit. And quite often you go to a presentation and someone might put a hand up and say, can I ask a question? It's like, well, of course you can. But in fact, people are kind of like scared, and we're scared because we don't want to make fools of ourselves and that. But also it's like we're scared because actually everything's based on you listen to me and I'm just going to push it out there. Whereas, as you quite rightly say, what happens is that when people ask questions, they get clarity, you build trust.
Yes. And, this is so profound that I decided to open the book with that chapter on myths and misperceptions about questions, because salespeople say, well, we don't have time. And people in day-to-day conversations, I don't want to seem intrusive or rude. And we've all heard that there's no such thing as a dumb question, but at the same time, we've all felt dumb after we've asked a question. So we get these negative reinforcements about questions, and they cause us to hold back. So I would like to reframe even how we think about questions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you say is, before we ask a question, we need to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get permission to ask a question. If you work first to be interested before you try to be interesting, people respond to that. And certainly, no matter how good your question is, you could ask the best crafted question. If you don't listen to the answer with interest, if you're spending time in your own head thinking about your next great question, it all falls apart. There's no real two-way dialogue, and you fracture the relationship instead of building it.
Yeah, I think in sales, we spend too much time, don't we, sitting there not listening to what the person's saying and thinking about, what the next point that we want to get across.
Yeah, I tell salespeople, worry less about selling something. Worry first about having a great conversation. From the great conversation, you're going to get what you need to sell something, but that comes later. Just park it for a little while.
Yeah, we're constantly saying to people, conversations create sales. And it seems to get lost out there. What we hear is, what we need is to have a cadence or something like that. That creates sales. Okay, right. One of the things you say in chapter 6 is that it's a segue into trust, and that questions invite conversations.
Absolutely. Think about any networking event you've ever been at. Anytime you've met a new person, it's awkward until someone asks a question. And then you think about the relationships where, let's say you're on your 4th date with someone, right? You want to keep the conversation, the discovery process with someone that you're forming a relationship with. You want to keep that on an upward trajectory. You don't stop asking questions. And my husband and I, we've been married almost 40 years. He better ask me questions and show that he's interested about my day, for example. So questions, they're conversations, and they're tools for really connecting with people. Yeah, the subtitle of the book, Discover Questions for Connections, Clarity, and Control. That's because those are the 3 groups of benefits, the way that I see them. And I put connections first on purpose, not just because that was in the book title the first time around, but because I think that is where the superpower comes from when you're asking questions.
Yeah, you actually say that asking questions is a superpower. It's one of the notes that I've made. And it is. I mean, that time when I started asking open questions, it changed everything.
Mm-hmm. Not all questions are created equally. So, Tim, you make a good point. An open-ended question will bring more from the other person than a closed-ended question. So let's call that leveling up. It's a big level up, but that's the first level up that you do. And then when you learn to craft questions that are stimulating even more thinking, they're higher order thinking when you ask why and how and what, than when you ask when, where, who. You have to think more with higher order questions. If I ask you a question that makes you think, you're captured in that moment, we're connected in that moment. And if I listen to what you say, I'm showing that I care. And so now we have that trust that is going to keep us in this conversation and in this relationship.
We've all been in that situation where someone said something and you think, that's a really good question. And it's not because sometimes we say that's a good question because we're taught, well, I was taught to say that because it gives you time to think. But actually, when you get asked a really good question, it's actually a really nice moment, isn't it?
It's my favorite compliment, especially when it comes with some reaction like, oh, and you can tell somebody's really, really thinking. Because how often, right, we're in this busy, hurry up, frenzied world. How often do we have an opportunity to just think? And when someone gives us the permission to think, they're asking us to think based on the question that they've posed. It's a gift.
So what makes a good question?
Well, a couple of things. I do think that better questions, higher order, open-ended or command statement questions will always bring back more information. And if that's what you want, if you're defining good question as one that yields information and relationship and trust, then absolutely, it has to be crafted in that way. And it's not just the question. So you're going to craft it in a way that draws people out. It's going to be purposeful, though, too. You're going to know what is the information that I'm seeking so that you're not making a fishing expedition or confusing people by the way you phrase the question. And then two more pieces are going to help really make it a quality conversation, a quality outcome from the question. Don't be afraid of the pause. In fact, there's power in that pause.
There is.
If it's a good question, people need time to think about their answer. Let it happen. And then, like you said, listen, truly listen, not just hear, but actively, maybe even empathetically listen.
Yeah. Yes. I wrote down what makes a good question, and you said purposeful, clear, and easy to understand. You then go into a long list of things that make a good question. And I hope you remember this because I actually don't remember writing my book. So quite often I get people quoting me from the book, and I sit there and I feel it's sometimes a bit like Keith Richards or Mick Jagger, who probably don't remember writing the particular song that. So you say what makes a good question, and I've written them all down because I like this: purposeful, clear, easy to understand, concise, singular, forthright, genuine, relevant, framed by intent, contextual, and well constructed.
Yeah, let me cherry pick out of that list just a little bit. Singular.
Yes.
We don't do that often enough. People ask compound questions. So think of yourself when you're asking a question as, what do I really want to know? And how can I make this easy for someone to tell me? And if you begin forming the question as you're speaking, you're more likely to stumble over yourself. And then your question becomes part of what you started with, and then something else you thought of, and then you see the look on the other person's face. So you try to clarify, and pretty soon you've got 2 or 3 things out there. People can only respond to the last one, and they won't be even sure if that's what you wanted. And you miss out. You miss out on the opportunity to create that clarity, to save that time, to make it easy for someone else and safe.
So give us an example.
Well, let's say, Tim, I wanted to know about your cycling. So if I said, oh, so Tim, have you been cycling lately? Where'd you go? I know you've been really busy. You were in London today. Maybe you haven't had time to cycling. Do you still cycle? It's a mess.
Yes, because I was about to give you a long answer, and then actually the answer is yes.
Right. Because I took you a different direction than where I purposefully may have taken you to begin with. It would have been a much nicer conversation had I just said, what opportunities have you had lately to go out cycling?
So you've then given a list of negatives. And I'm going to refer to my notes, which is throwaway questions, ambush, gotcha, leading. I can't read my writing on that one. Ponderous, interrogation strings, why, prying, ill-timed.
Yeah, which one should we talk about? Let's see. How about we talk about questions that feel like interrogations? We probably don't mean to make people feel that way. Even if you're in a power position, you're the manager and you're trying to find out why someone did something, even then you probably don't want to put them on the defensive because, it's not going to get you very far. And that's one of the myths and misperceptions that cause people to not ask questions at all. Well, accidentally, the way questions begin to feel like interrogations is if they're very back and forth, close-ended or something else that invites a short answer given, next question, and we're volleying back and forth. And with that there's not too much listening. With that, there's the immediate response of what does she really want? And so people become even more closed off. They're now giving even shorter answers. You're barraging them to try to get to what you want. Much better instead to use a command statement or something different, even at the opening. Instead of, I'm going to pick a part to this until I nail you down, it's more like, hey, tell me what happened here. And then allow the answer, listen fully, tell me more, invite it out there as opposed to having to look like you're micromanaging or trying to back someone into a corner.
So you also have your 8 types of purposeful questions, don't you? So your discoverer questions.
Yeah.
Discoverer trademark questions, or is it discoverer questions trademark? So I can't.
Yeah. It is discover questions, registered trademark.
Yeah.
So discover, the acronym, it represents the 8 purposes of asking questions. And this is usually quite surprising to people that there are only 8 purposes to ever ask a question. Even more surprising is that most people only use 3 or 4 of those purposes. So you've still got room to expand. And what I mean by purpose is, why did you ask that? Okay, what were you hoping to gain by asking that question? When you know the purpose, when you know what the 8 purposes are, your questions are going to become tidier. You won't have those messy, wait, that's not what I really want, let me try again types of moments. You'll also be able to mix it up. For example, the V in Discover, it's my favorite, and that's a value question.
Mm-hmm.
We don't ask these nearly often enough. Let's talk about sales, right? So the customer says, I'd like to achieve A and B and C. And the salesperson knows that they could sell C. So they jump right in, right? They pounce on whatever that customer's just said, and they're off to the races trying to sell C. One question could change everything. And that's a value question. Out of A, B, and C, which one is most important to you and why? I want to find out the hierarchy of value, what matters to this customer. And with that one question, I find out C doesn't matter very much at all. It's a nice to have, it's an optional thing, right? And if we want to focus on what really matters to people, value questions are pretty important.
So if we rattle off so it's discover, so DISCOVER, which is data, issue, solution, consequence, outcome, value, example, and rationale. I can read my own writing.
Gold star.
Thank you. That's not what my teachers at school would have said. But it's interesting that you've been able to crystallize that down to that. And the great thing about in the book is that you then go example, there's example. You could have asked the question like this, but you should have asked it like this. Not saying this is how you ask questions. It's about showing what often we say, and then saying if you did it like this, you would get a better response. A bit like what you just said then.
Yeah, this is the awareness. I could easily write a book, hundreds of pages of questions to go ask. Here, you're in sales, go ask these questions. You're in coaching, go ask these questions. But I think that's a problem. And I have found that when people have scripted questions that they go down the list of, you don't really hear the answers. They don't know what to do with the answers. They miss the follow-ups. Yes. I'd rather tell you how to ask questions and let you invent your own and be more purposeful and in the moment. And that becomes the superpower that you were talking about earlier, Tim. That's where every conversation magically transforms, and you get so much more out of those few minutes that you have with the client or those few minutes that you have in your busy day for any conversation.
And certainly mastering asking good questions, as you say in the book, is a superpower. And at the end of the day, you're going to earn more money, aren't you, by doing that?
Absolutely.
If you're in
You're going to save time. You're going to be more effective. You're going to inspire and motivate people. Like I said, there's over 100 benefits documented in other people's research that it's all now in the book. I gathered it up. But questions do things that nothing else can do.
And also, if from a sales perspective, if you're sitting in front of a customer and go, you're going to be one of 5 salespeople. And what the customer is looking for is not just about the best product, is what person and what organization can I work with? And if you're the person that's asking the most detailed questions, I remember going out to Dubai, and it was about the problem was too much inventory in the warehouse. And as a solution, we were not good in warehousing. I walked in, it was 40 degrees heat. I walked up to the CIO, shook his hand and said, "Why have you got all those tires outside the front?" And the salesperson kicked me and said, "Don't be rude, don't ask questions." And the CIO said, "Fine, I actually tell you that." And what happened was the problem wasn't too much inventory in the warehouse. He had a transportation problem and we were the number 1 in terms of selling transportation software. So we went from a deal where we probably shouldn't have been there to a deal where we won it. Purely because I said, "Why have you got those tires out there?" Yeah. I know it's a simple question, but it was the fact that curiosity and asking that question which turned around that deal.
I love this example, right? This is classic. Question asking is rude, said the salesperson.
Yeah.
Genuine interest and curiosity.
Don't ask questions. You're rude. Come out to Dubai, you English person, and ask stupid questions.
But when you genuinely have interest and curiosity in a person, you learn things, you get information, but you have a connection too. We live in the experience economy. B2B, B2C doesn't matter. We, as consumers, when we're buying something, we want a good experience. And questions, quality conversations that come from quality questions, that in and of itself is a memorable experience. It differentiates a salesperson from competitors. And at the same time, you're gathering more information. You can be more strategic. You have more to work with.
Deb, thank you so much for coming on. I have to stop because I could talk to you for hours. Could you hold up your book again and remind people where they can?
Yep. This is on Amazon. It's Discover Questions for Connections, Clarity, and Control, being able to claim some measure of self-control. It is on Amazon, and I am so glad, Tim, that I got to be here and share this. It's brand new. So
it is, yeah. And I've read it, and as I said, I think it's awesome. And thank you for coming on. Remind people where they can get hold of you.
LinkedIn, Deb Calvert. The company is People First Productivity Solutions. The Learning Academy is peoplefirstpotential.com.
Deb, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it and talking about your new book. As soon as I spotted that you had that, I came towards you and said, Deb, you must come on my podcast. So thank you so much for coming on.